Okay, the sheer scale of the Han chief's operation is staggering. Seeing the army kitted out in that meticulously described gear, mountain pattern armor, specialized weapons down to the named craftsman, felt incredibly real and terrifyingly efficient. Then the leap to designing those massive new ships, double the size of the current ones, just underscores the relentless ambition. But the real shocker was Lu Xingfa. Threads. Bearings born from wanting a rotating table for his daughter. It's moments like these, sparks of almost unbelievable ingenuity, that make this world so compelling. Yet, the whiplash is brutal. Jinwu's return, the diplomatic failure, the buck-passing overpayment, and his swift, cold execution. It's a stark reminder of the ruthlessness underpinning this empire building. And poor You Zhi, summoned to sit beside a severed head. You can just feel the weight of expectation and danger settling on him. The stakes just went sky high. Dealing with the Xin tribe won't be simple diplomacy anymore. You Zhi's heart skipped a beat. What was the chief suddenly up to? Did he disapprove of the marriage alliance with the Youjiang? But You Zhi was genuinely quite taken with that girl, Zhang Lei. He had no choice but to steel himself and reply, "Chief, yes. Yes, I quite like the girl. Besides, if we can build a good relationship with the Youjiang, maybe their whole tribe will join us directly. Wouldn't our Han tribe become even stronger then?" After speaking, You Zhi stole a glance at you, trying to read your expression. Unfortunately, your face was blank, like a stone. "What if I ordered you to lead troops and wipe out the Youjiang?" You asked again, your gaze sharp as you stared at You Zhi. Those words hit You Zhi like a hammer, leaving him stunned. Attack the Youjiang? Why? Had that Jiang Xuan fellow angered the chief? That couldn't be it. You Zhi couldn't dwell on it. He had to stop the chief. With a thud, he dropped to one knee, cupped his hands respectfully, and pleaded urgently, "Chief, I am willing to go persuade the Youjiang to submit. If I fail, you can have my head." Your expression turned abruptly cold, your tone like ice shards. "And if I insist that you attack?" Yuji's body went rigid. It was over. The chief wasn't satisfied with him trying to smooth things over. He was forcing him to pick a side. The Han tribe or the Youjiang, choose one. No room for negotiation, how to choose. Did he even need to think about it? Life in the Han tribe was comfortable, living the good life with relatives and friends all here. Besides, his uncles, Yu Fu and Yu Yi, were high in the chief's favor. One managing merchant caravans traveling the world, the other exploring unknown seas by ship. If they wanted to defect, they had plenty of opportunities, yet they'd never even considered it. Could he, You Zhi, do something so despicable? It looked like he'd have to say goodbye to the girl. The thoughts raced through his mind in the blink of an eye. You Zhi decisively dropped his other knee, prostrating himself fully, his tone firm and resolute. "You Zhi, I am willing to obey the chief's command to lead troops and attack the Youjiang. Sit." "Huh?" The chief's single word suddenly floated into his ears, leaving You Zhi completely bewildered. "Sit? Asking me to sit? Weren't we going to war? What was going on?" Had the chief scared his brain into short-circuiting? He snapped his head up, looking at you with a blank expression. He saw that you had already settled leisurely into the main seat by the tea table and were gesturing towards the side with your chin indicating for him to sit down. You Zhi dazedly shuffled to the side and sat, still unable to wrap his head around the situation. "Chief, when do I set out? It's just turned winter. The river hasn't frozen yet. If we wait another month, crossing will be difficult. Set out on what expedition?" You sipped slowly at the strong tea, incidentally helping to suppress the faint smell of blood in the room. "Chief, didn't you just say you wanted to attack the Youjiang? We need to act quickly, or it'll be trouble once the river freezes." You Zhi was even more confused. Had the chief lost his memory? Had he already forgotten what he'd just said? "Why would we attack the Youjiang?" You asked back lightly. "You Zhi. Wasn't it you just now? Didn't you say you were confident you could persuade them to submit? Then why fight?" You continued to question, as if the person who had been so harsh and demanding just moments ago, forcing him to choose sides, wasn't you at all. But Chief, just now You Zhi felt so wronged he was almost in tears. We're not attacking? If we're not attacking, why did you scare me like that? And force me to make a choice? Were you just messing with me? Is it fun to scare people? You, however, wore an expression of breezy indifference. It had just been a small test to see if the young man could keep his priorities straight when faced with a beautiful woman, whether he'd choose the woman or the tribe. Fortunately, he hadn't done anything foolish, hadn't opposed you. Young men in the throes of love easily lose their heads, and you had genuinely worried he might impulsively choose love. If that had happened, the position of Jinwu Guard, Imperial, Guard Unit, Commander could not have been given to him. Someone too impulsive could easily be exploited by enemies, with unimaginable consequences. You certainly didn't believe you were the only intelligent person in the world. However, based on this, the young man's on-the-spot decision-making seemed decent, and he thought quickly. Perhaps he really was promising material. Mentally giving You Zhi a score, you pointed at Jin Yi's head on the floor. You know who he is, right? I know. Jinwu Guard Commander, Jin Yi, You Zhi answered without hesitation. He had heard. The minor official read the notice very clearly earlier. Then do you know what the Jinwu Guard does? You asked again. The Jinwu Guard, the chief's personal guard, responsible for protecting the chief's safety, clearing the way, standing guard, carrying banners, and keeping watch. You Zhi blurted it out again. But after speaking, his mind started working, and he sensed something wasn't quite right. Clearing the way, standing guard, carrying banners, keeping watch. But why had he never seen these people? And Jin Yi, since he was the head of the personal guard, practically a bodyguard, why wasn't he by the chief's side? Why had he gone, off mingling with the envoy mission instead? You Zhi was indeed smart. He hadn't paid attention before, but now that he thought about it, he felt there were hidden depths here. But since the chief hadn't elaborated, he didn't dare ask. Correct, they are the personal guard, you stated directly. Then are you willing to take over from Jin Yi and become the Jinwu Guard commander? The thought had indeed flashed through Yu Zhi's mind when he first entered the room. But back then, he hadn't realized the position was such a hot potato. Now that the chief was actually offering it to him, he hesitated again. The intuition he'd honed since childhood was frantically sounding alarms. There was definitely a catch. He asked tentatively, Chief, besides standing guard and keeping watch, does the Jinwu Guard have other duties? If it's just standing around, I'd rather go sailing with my uncles. Standing guard really doesn't suit me. Yu Zhi's voice grew quieter as he spoke, eventually fading to a mosquito's buzz. But you heard him clearly. A playful, mischievous smile appeared on your face, the kind that said, I was waiting for you to ask that. Are you sure you want to know? Once you know, you either become the commander or you end up like him. While staring intently at Yu Zhi, you pointed a finger at Jin Yi's head on the floor. Now do you still want to know? A trap, it really is a huge trap. Alarm bells screamed in Yu Zhi's mind. The chief had sprung this trap unexpectedly. No, wait, didn't I walk right up to the edge myself and ask? Damn it, I've been played by the chief, still asking if he wanted to know. This was basically asking, do you want to jump into the pit yourself or be pushed into your death? This choice was even more messed up than the earlier one about attacking the Youjiang. Of course, he could choose not to listen. But this was a commander. There were only 3 in the entire Han tribe. Rarer even than a governor, those high-ranking regional officials. And judging by the chief's secrecy, the Jinwu Guard must be involved in some enormous secret. Either you didn't know, or if you found out, you had to be an insider. Otherwise, you died. Such a confidential matter, even his own 2 uncles didn't know about it. If he took this position, wouldn't he be even more impressive than his uncles? Becoming this commander carried immense risk, but the opportunity was also once in a lifetime. Junius had just died, and the chief thought of him first. What incredible trust and high regard. He was even planning to tell him this deadly secret. For a moment under your gaze, Yuji's expression flickered uncertainly, clearly caught in an intense internal struggle. Consult his uncles? Looking at the chief's demeanor, there wasn't a chance. He had to choose himself. This was a rare chance to rise rapidly. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. After agonizing for a long while, Yuji secretly gritted his teeth and decided to risk it all. You Zhi is willing to be the commander. Please give your instructions, Chief. You nodded in satisfaction, got up, took a booklet from a shelf behind you and handed it to him. This lists all the members of the Jinwu Guard. Take a look. Yuji opened it curiously. It recorded basic information like names, native places, family situations, and enlistment dates. There weren't many people, only about 30 or so. This was far different from what he'd imagined. The other two guard units each had over 2,000 men. He, the commander, would only have this handful of soldiers? Moreover, that earlier question resurfaced. Weren't these men supposed to be the chief's bodyguards? Where were they? What were they all doing? Chief, the people on this list, they're in the merchant caravans on the grasslands, and a large group is with the envoy mission, you explained calmly, taking another sip of tea. However, nobody knows they are the Jinwu Guard. The only one who knows their identities is me. Of course, now there's also you. Yuji was astonished. These people were actually undercover in the caravans and the envoy mission? And only the chief and himself knew their identities? What huge scheme was the chief planning? Not even Ambassador Shuya knows. Yuji found it hard to believe. You didn't speak, just shook your head. Yuji was even more shocked. What on earth were these people doing? Keeping secrets even from Shuya, one of the chief's most staunchly loyal confidants? You must be curious too, you said, looking at him. The Jinwu Guard are clearly my personal guard, yet they aren't by my side. Their identities are top secret, and even my most trusted Shuya doesn't know there are Jinwu Guard members. Hidden right beside him. Seeing Yuji nodding vigorously, you continued. That's because the Jinwu Guard isn't just my personal guard. It is also a secret intelligence agency. Although it's a bit small, it's just starting out. After all, Chief, what's an intelligence agency? It was the first time Yuji had heard the term, and his face showed complete bewilderment. An intelligence agency, you explained, is mainly responsible for collecting and transmitting internal and external intelligence, and incidentally handling some dirty work behind enemy lines like carrying out assassinations, stealing important items, spreading rumors, things like that. The internal aspect hasn't been established yet. But I can tell you now, the plan is eventually to plant personnel near various high-level figures and major merchants within the tribe to keep an eye on them. Are they corrupt? Are they colluding with outsiders? Are they smuggling or profiteering? Even finding out what they usually eat, where they sleep, how many mistresses they keep on the side. All this information must be thoroughly investigated and reported directly to me. Of course, we haven't started that yet. For now, the Jinwu Guard's main focus remains external. Hearing about these tasks, Yuji's jaw nearly hit the floor. He hadn't imagined the chief had secretly set up such a department. This meant he didn't trust his officials. And here Yuji had thought those high officials seemed quite prestigious. It turned out they were all under the chief's watchful eye the entire time. Although internal surveillance hadn't begun, he could already imagine the department's power. This was practically the chief's trump card, his ultimate weapon. With it, if anyone dared to make sneaky moves below, the chief could immediately nip it in the bud. Ruthless. Absolutely ruthless. You continued speaking. Right now, the Han tribe's operation isn't that large, and I can still trust the people I'm using. But the tribe needs to develop. There will be more and more people, and the territory will expand. In the future, I'll definitely have to use some unfamiliar people. I can't guarantee whether these people will be loyal or whether they'll work honestly. That's why I need a department like this to watch them for me. It wasn't easy to build the Han tribe, and I absolutely will not allow anyone to destroy it. You Zhi listened and nodded. The words sounded like both an explanation and reassurance. When he first heard about monitoring all officials, he had indeed felt a bit chilled, thinking the chief didn't trust anyone. Did that include his own two uncles? But after hearing the chief's reasoning, he felt it made sense. When a tribe grows large, people's hearts are hard to fathom. Taking precautions is necessary. Moreover, the chief had said it hadn't started yet, indicating that for now he still trusted everyone, including You Zhi's uncles. This department was mainly for the future. Having figured this out, the little knot of unease in You Zhi's heart dissolved. He no longer felt the chief was heartless. After all, it was for the good of the entire tribe. It was understandable. So he asked further, "Then, when the chief speaks of external, does that refer to? You mentioned the people on the list are in the caravans and envoy mission. Is it to gather intelligence about the grasslands and the Shin tribe?" You nodded appreciatively. The young man's mind really was sharp. You then briefly explained the original plan: how to plant spies in the Shin tribe step by step, how to infiltrate the enemy ranks, how to establish communication channels through the envoy mission, and the subsequent series of cunning maneuvers planned against the Shin tribe, and so on. Listening to all this, stuff he had never encountered before, made Yuji's blood boil with excitement, and he silently exclaimed how thrilling it was, especially the idea of secretly scheming against others while they remained completely in the dark. It was simply exhilarating. When he heard that the chief's men had successfully infiltrated the Shin tribe's envoy mission and were even being treated like precious treasures by the enemy, Yuji felt an inexplicable thrill. He suddenly felt that perhaps this department, this position of commander, seemed truly quite suitable for him. Listening to your plan, which sounded like something straight out of a spy thriller, Yuji's eyes nearly popped out of his head, but his mind worked fast, and he immediately grasped the core of the Jinwu Guard, intelligence gathering playing dirty. So, after I take office, my main focus will still be on the Shin tribe. Having processed this, Yuji had already slipped into the commander's role, proactively asking for work direction. Correct, you affirmed. For now, it's mainly the Jin tribe and the grasslands. We're planning to build a city on the grasslands next year. You know about that, right? You've followed your uncle across the grasslands more than once or twice, so you're familiar with the area. Therefore, I have an important task for you. Find me a good location for a city along the lakeshore. First, it must be possible to build a pier. This is paramount. Second, it's best if there's a river, not lake water, but a river flowing deep into the grasslands. Ideally, one ships can navigate. Third, the land must be arable, enough to feed a city's population at least. Fourth, having a forest nearby is best, but it's acceptable if there isn't one. Worst case, we'll ship coal there for fuel later. These are the site selection criteria. Find several potential candidates. We'll definitely build more than one city in the future. Once you find suitable spots, record them and report back to me. Besides this, you also need to build your own team and expand the intelligence network. I authorize you to use the Han tribe's name to absorb some smaller tribes on the grasslands and train the clever ones. But remember, distinguish between internal and external personnel. The outer circle should only gather information. They are forbidden from transmitting messages, and they absolutely must not know what they are truly doing. There are many methods for intelligence work: capturing people, harsh interrogation, throwing money around for bribery. All are permissible. That's for the grasslands. As for personnel for the Shin tribe and within our own ranks, you can select from disabled veterans or adopt orphans and train them from childhood. Especially in Weishan and Liuyang prefectures, those newly joined tribes have many orphans. If any family is unwilling to raise them, you take them all in. You paused, then another idea struck you. Let's do this. In my name, establish charity houses throughout the Han tribe. On the surface, they'll be for taking in orphans and showing compassion, but administrative control will belong to the Jinwu Guard. This way, it'll be easier for you to select people, picking out promising seedlings from a young age to join the Jinwu Guard. Hearing your meticulous arrangements, short-term expansion through absorption and bribery, long-term self-sufficiency via orphanages, the development blueprint for the Jinwu Guard instantly became clear. You Zhi was so moved he almost kowtowed, on the spot, quickly bowing again to pledge his loyalty. You nodded, satisfied, and delivered a final warning. Your predecessor lost his head precisely because he concealed intelligence. I don't want you making the same mistake. Report to me regularly. Even if there's nothing major, report the trivial details too. Even if you hear that Mao Dun had a few more kids, write it down for me. A chill ran down Yuji's spine. He understood. The chief was setting performance indicators. Whether there was anything to report or not, he had to make the effort at regular intervals. He immediately promised, "Rest assured, Chief, You Zhi will absolutely not disappoint. Your expectations. I will definitely fulfill my duties conscientiously and strictly guard secrets." Good. Fulfill duties conscientiously and strictly guard secrets. I've noted that down. You remember it well, too. Your tone turned serious. Remember, once you leave this room, the Jinwu Guard is my personal guard, with no other identity. This matter, including your uncles, your wife, without my command, you cannot tell anyone. I have my own plans for when to make it public. Yes, You Zhi acknowledged, then asked cautiously, "Then, Chief, about my marriage to Zhonglei, get it done quickly. I'll give you a month and a half. After that, you need to get your ass to work." You waved a hand dismissively. "I promise you, once the city on the grasslands is built, you can bring your wife over. So you'd better be quick about selecting that city site." "Yes." "Understood." You Zhi cupped his hands again, received the full Jinwu Guard set. Tiger, tally, official seal, waist plaque, and went home, his belly full of secrets and excitement. Over the next few days, the Han tribe exploded with commotion. First, news of Jin Yi's beheading spread like wildfire. After all, this was the first time the chief had publicly executed an official, and the method was quite terrifying. However, once the official notice was posted, listing his crimes, public opinion immediately shifted. That guy deserved worse than death. That was over 10,000 head of cattle and horses. If they had been brought back, everyone could have rented a few extra animals during the busy farming season. Now, it had all gone down the drain because of him alone. Who would speak up for him now? The notice was public, so Niu Wei and the others studying abroad in the Han tribe naturally learned about it too. Before he could even find you to explain, you summoned him directly. Your attitude was extremely harsh. You announced they were suspended from their studies to reflect, ordering Niu Wei to immediately send people back to the Mao Dun tribe and the Jin tribe to press them for payment. Otherwise, the Han tribe army could march at any moment. You told him to consider the consequences himself. If they dragged it out any longer, he'd be the first one executed as a warning before battle. Niu Wei was scared out of his wits and could only quickly dispatch 20 men from the foreign students, 10 to find Mao Dun, 10 back to the Shin tribe to deliver a message to the Grand Commander. He himself felt incredibly aggrieved. The hard-won opportunity to study was about to fall through because of this stupid mess. He couldn't understand why the Grand Commander would do something so foolish, nor could he fathom that damned Mao Dun, whose seizure of livestock implicated the Jin tribe in falling out with the Great Han. It seemed it was time for a change in who handled the sea salt business. Meanwhile, You Zhi, who had been quietly promoted, wasn't idle either. After contacting Jiang Xuan and Jiang Yong, he nervously prepared for his wedding while simultaneously, in his capacity as the future son-in-law, indirectly persuading the Youjiang tribe to submit. Jiang Xuan had spent some time in the Han tribe and witnessed its prosperity firsthand. He had also heard about Jin Yi losing his head and learned that the Han tribe actually had ways to acquire large numbers of cattle and horses. Although this time it was foiled by Jin Yi, Jiang Xuan, having witnessed the Han tribe's military might, wasn't worried at all. He firmly believed that with the Han tribe's strength, defeating any enemy and acquiring cattle and horses was no problem at all. Sure enough, just 2 days after Jin Yi's head hit the ground, over 2,000 head of cattle and horses were escorted to Hanyang City by dozens of merchant caravan members. This impressed Jiang Xuan even more, making him view the Han tribe with newfound respect. After careful consideration, on the very day of Yu Zhi's wedding, Jiang Xuan finally made the decision. The Youjiang tribe would join the Han tribe, the entire clan. When you received the news, you were greatly pleased. First, you rewarded Yu Zhi handsomely, granting him special permission to go to the metallurgy workshop and have a custom weapon forged for himself. Then, you specifically summoned Jiang Xuan. You formally bestowed the surname Jiang upon the Youjiang tribe, although they were already surnamed Jiang. This was official recognition. Next, the two of you began discussing the specifics of the Youjiang tribe's relocation. Jiang Xuan showed great sincerity, stating that he would follow all the chief's arrangements, only raising a few minor requests regarding sacrificial rites. Compared to the Han tribe, the Youjiang placed special importance on sacrifices, praying to heaven for favorable weather, abundant harvests, and a flourishing population. You indicated this was no problem. The Han tribe also performed sacrifices to heaven. Jiang Xuan then proposed sacrificing to Sheji, she being the god of the soil, Ji the god of grains. This was crucial for an agrarian civilization. In your previous life, you were a standard science student with a patchy understanding of these traditional cultures. When establishing rituals initially, you had only promoted respect heaven and emulate ancestors, completely forgetting about Sheji. It wasn't until Jiang Xuan mentioned it that you suddenly recalled the term Sheji. Was there even a need to discuss this? Sheji was passed down by the ancestors of Huaxia, ancient name for China. Since you remembered, it absolutely had to be added to the sacrificial package. You immediately decided that when the capital city was eventually established, a special altar of heaven would be built for sacrificing to the state and its foundations, represented by Sheji. Jiang Xuan was very pleased seeing you readily accept his good advice. But when the discussion turned to sacrificial offerings, the two of you locked horns. All because of one sentence from Jiang Xuan. In years of disaster, human sacrifices are needed. Human sacrifice? Your mind instantly flashed to those brutal rulers of the Yinshang dynasty. You were carrying the banner of putting people first. How could such an inhumane practice occur in the Han tribe? You rejected it outright on the spot. We will certainly perform sacrifices, but we can't pin all our hopes on the gods. They'd be exhausted too. Besides, if we keep asking for this and that, the gods will find us too greedy. Your attitude was resolute. When disaster strikes, the first thing we must do is figure out how to save ourselves. Harvesting more grain in bumper years, storing more grain, that's more effective than sacrificing 100 times during a disaster. As for human sacrifice, I don't care about other places, but in the Han tribe, it is absolutely forbidden. While explaining, you educated him on the policies of stockpiling grain during good years for famine relief and government regulation of grain prices. Hearing you say this, although Jiang Xuan still felt a bit uncomfortable, he ultimately nodded. Because the methods you described indeed sounded reliable, and you had agreed to his other requests, there was no need to stubbornly insist on human sacrifice. Moreover, you had also said that if live offerings were absolutely necessary, slaughtering pigs and sheep was fine, just not humans or cattle and horses. Those were precious labor resources. People were already scarce during famine years. Killing more for sacrifices might genuinely anger the spirits and would be damn useless for disaster relief anyway. Jiang Xuan finally accepted your reasoning. He carefully recalled the history of the Youjiang tribe, and it seemed human sacrifice really hadn't been of any damn use and might well have offended the gods. Thus, the matter of the Youjiang tribe's submission was completely settled. The time was set for after the summer grain harvest next year. You arranged it this way, mainly considering the numerous matters in the first half of next year. Migrating in spring would affect spring plowing, and moving directly over would leave them without housing. Delaying until summer made everything more stable. Having dealt with all matters in Hanyang City, you rushed non-stop to the military camp outside Fuma Pass. After inspecting individual weapon training and tactical movements, you began formally implementing formation training. Initially, practicing the large 4,000-man formations yielded decent results. When the gongs and drums sounded the orders, the soldiers changed formations swiftly. The formations you summarized weren't complex, just 3 types. One was a hollow circular chariot formation. War chariots formed a circle, soldiers hiding behind them for defense, specifically designed to counter cavalry charges, emphasizing a play-it-safe tactic. Another was a hollow circular formation combining spears and shields. Saber and shield soldiers and spear and round shield soldiers formed the outer line to hold the front, while archers and crossbowmen clustered in the center, unleashing volleys of fire. It could defend against cavalry and also counterattack, balancing offense and defense. The last was a boar's rush attack formation. Saber and shield soldiers formed the vanguard. Spearmen and halberdiers followed closely. Archers and crossbowmen provided ranged fire support from the rear, and cavalry protected the flanks. After breaking the enemy line, they could pursue and encircle, emphasizing an aggressive charge tactic. These 3 large formations had clear roles, and after 2 or 3 months of practice, the soldiers could basically follow orders strictly. But when it came to practicing small squad assault formations, you suddenly discovered a huge pitfall. Previously, for ease of management, you had organized units by weapon type. Now, when forming small squads of 5 or fewer, problems arose. Putting 5 or 6 saber and shield soldiers together provided enough defense, but they lacked reach. Without long weapons, putting 5 or 6 spearmen together gave them reach, but without shields in front, they were just sitting ducks. Wasn't this nonsense? You vaguely recalled something about Qi Jiguang's Mandarin duck formation. That thing, as you remembered, wasn't composed of a single troop type. One formation included soldiers with long weapons, like wolf-brush spears, soldiers with shields, rattan shields, soldiers with firearms, and soldiers with short spears, a mix of weapon types capable of fighting in various configurations. Your method of dividing units strictly by weapon type was clearly flawed. You had no choice but to issue an urgent order: military structure reform. The overall structure remained unchanged. Cavalry, archers, crossbowmen, and scouts would still be independent corps. But the saber and shield soldiers and the spear, halberd soldiers would be mixed together at the Zongqi, 100-man squad level. However, within the Xiaoqi, 10-man squad, they would remain single-weapon units. This way, they could quickly deploy into large formations, but when small squad assaults were needed during battle, soldiers could easily team up with nearby comrades to form small, multi-weapon combined formations. You led the troops, drilling them sequentially from the 6-man, 6 harmonies formation to the 5-man, 5 elements formation, the 4-man, 4 symbols formation, and finally down to the smallest 3-man, 3 powers formation. The 3-man, 3 powers formation, Sankai Gen in particular, was designated as a key training item. The objective was clear: capture prisoners. One shield bearer would be up front, drawing fire and acting as a tank. One spearman halberdier would be responsible for engaging the enemy head-on, and the last captive catcher would seize the opportunity to bind the enemy. Even the officers from the 2 garrisons couldn't help but marvel when they saw it. This 3 powers formation had clear roles, integrated offense and defense, was small and flexible, and its efficiency in capturing prisoners was much higher than the 5 elements or 6 harmonies formations. It was practically a model for for highly efficient combat. While drilling troops in the camp, you were also mentally calculating next year's small goals. Expansion, absolutely. Expansion. As long as you were still breathing, this continent had to bear the Han name. Next year's main KPIs were threefold: beat up the barbarians and capture able-bodied men, seize a new salt mine, and bring back the Youjiang tribe's 2,000-plus people. Where would the Youjiang live? You had already figured that out. Once, the main army departed in the spring. This vast military camp would be empty, perfect for them. A camp for over 4,000 could easily accommodate 2,000. Let them settle in the camp first, then build a new city for them during the agricultural off-season. Strive to have every household living in new brick houses before winter. Of course, following the old rules, the Youjiang would also be broken up. Part would be bundled with the newcomers from Weishan Prefecture to form the Xingang Prefecture. The rest would be inserted into the nearby counties under Hanyang Prefecture to dilute their tendency to stick together. Xingang Prefecture was next year's major project. The more people and land the Han tribe had, the more insatiable the demand for steel became. The construction of Xingang Prefecture had to proceed at full speed. That covered internal infrastructure. Externally, there were three main efforts. The chemical plant on the Lake Island, establishing new prefectures and counties in the coal mining area, and that planned city on the grasslands. Everything else was more or less arranged, except for building the city in the coal mining area, which you hadn't paid much attention to before, until a few days ago. Jinyan, stationed over at the Lu tribe's territory, sent in a year-end summary. This fellow wrote effusively about construction achievements and coal prospecting progress, then casually mentioned at the end. Using the labor market method, he had already gathered over 6,000 people locally. Over 6,000. You knew perfectly well this number surely included entire families. Subtracting the old, weak, women and children, 1,500 able-bodied young men would be the absolute maximum. But this population size, even if not quite enough for a prefecture, was definitely sufficient for establishing a county town. Besides, it was new territory, so setting it up directly as a prefecture wasn't out of line either. This Jingyan fellow was quite slippery. He detailed meticulously how many piers were built, how large the freight yards and warehouses were, yet the crucial information about population was passed over lightly. The more he did this, the more it piqued your curiosity. How did he conjure up so many people? It wouldn't do if you didn't ask, and the moment you asked, it gave him the perfect opportunity to boast about his accomplishments. You saw through his little scheme instantly. It was nothing more than wanting to flex his muscles, earn himself an official post, preferably that of a prefect. Fine, since you saw through it, you couldn't be bothered to play games with him. You replied directly, hand over the population registers and land ledgers, and you would appoint him prefect. Seeds, farming tools, plow oxen, and tools would be distributed per capita. Next year, he would be responsible for planning and building the new city. Location his choice. Report any shortages. Before next winter set in, he absolutely had to build a city for you. If he failed, he could scram. You're capable, right? Fine, go build a city yourself. When Jingyan received the reply, holding the paper, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Half of him was ecstatic. His dream came true. The chief really made him prefect. The other half was worried. The chief actually expected him to conjure a prefecture city out of thin air within a year? Wasn't this pushing someone to their death? Fortunately, the chief promised supplies. Otherwise, without even tools. How the hell could he build anything? The biggest headache now was manpower. He only had just over 1,000 laborers under him. If they all went to build the city, who would mine coal and farm? Jingyan put down the letter, rubbed his face hard, and steeled himself. Can't lie, I guess I'll have to keep bluffing. Ah no, recruiting people. Finally, looking at the name the chief had given the new prefecture in the letter, a surge of fervor ignited again in his chest. Dongxin Prefecture. East of the Liuyang River, a land rich in firewood and coal. From today onwards, I am Jing. Lian, the prefect of this Dongxin Prefecture. Late in the 12th month, winter was half over. Today was the day You Zhi set off for the grasslands. You didn't see him off, but just before he left, You made a special trip back from the military camp to summon him once more, re-emphasizing the work priorities, especially the task of finding the city site. With spring imminent, it was urgent, absolutely critical to hurry. You Zhi left, and you didn't return to the military camp either. After several months of training, the soldiers were proficient. The rest was just practice making perfect. However, the date of the expedition was drawing closer. How was the construction of the troop transport ships progressing? This was a major concern. You prepared to head to the shipyard in Youjiang prefecture. Just as you were about to leave, Xiaodi stopped you. "Husband, you're leaving again." Xiaodi stood before you, her 7-month belly prominent. Beside her, Zhan Ying, also heavily pregnant, watched you with pleading eyes, though with Xiaodi present, she never spoke first. "Yes. Going to Youjiang prefecture for a few days to check on the shipbuilding," you replied, turning back to, "Put on your bearskin cloak." "Husband," Xiaodi's voice held a hint of pleading, "Mother says our babies will be born in just over 2 months. Can you be back then? I'm scared if you're not here." Zhan Ying also looked aggrieved, her small eyes fixed on you. You blinked, your first reaction. Why is this girl being a bit dramatic? But the thought had barely passed when you suddenly realized, oh, this wasn't the modern era with advanced medical care. Giving birth in these times was like walking through the gates of hell, a 9 in 10 chance of death. If you weren't there, when Xiaodi went into labor, and something happened to her, wouldn't you miss even a final farewell? You'd been husband and wife for so many years. It was a lie to say there were no feelings. Xiaodi's request wasn't unreasonable at all. However, you were the chief of the Han tribe with a pile of matters waiting for your decision. How could you possibly attend to everything? You thought for a moment, turned, helped Xiaodi sit down on the edge of the Kang, heated brick bed, and said softly, "I definitely have to go check the shipyard. I was originally planning to lead the troops personally on the expedition in the spring, but looking at the timing for you two, I'm afraid I won't make it." Hearing you still plan to go out and fight, Xiaodi and Zhan Ying looked even more upset. They were about to give birth and their husband wouldn't be around. What if Xiao Dai was about to speak up and ask you to stay? You raised a finger and gently pressed it against her lips. "You're both about to give birth. I definitely need to be here. How about this? Later you tell your mother to put aside the workshop matters for now and just stay with you both these few months, helping to look after you. As for me, I'll go to the shipyard first and arrange everything for the expedition. Before you two give birth, I guarantee I'll be back. How does that sound?" You softened your tone, comforting them. A smile immediately bloomed on Xiaodi Dai's face. She nodded vigorously with an and even planted a kiss on your cheek. You continued with instructions. "You two, when the weather's good, get out and walk around more. Don't just lie or sit all the time. Strolling is good for the body, gives you strength for childbirth and makes it smoother. Of course, don't overtire yourselves either. Manage it yourselves. Also, have your mother find several experienced midwives in the city. Contact them beforehand so they can lend a hand when the time comes." Got it. Husband, go quickly. Remember to come back early. Sister Ying and I will both be waiting for you. Having received your assurances and arrangements, Xiao Dai felt settled and conversely started tidying your collar, urging you to leave quickly. You smiled helplessly, kissed both mothers-to-be on the forehead, and only then headed out towards Youjiang prefecture. But the entire journey, you were inwardly conflicted. This time you had mobilized over 4,000 elite troops. You truly intended to lead the campaign personally. But this bunch of greenhorns, from generals to soldiers, had never fought a proper war. Could you really rest easy without supervising them yourself? Yet both wives happened to be giving birth at this critical juncture. This completely disrupted your plans. Across 2 lifetimes, this was your first time becoming a father. To say you weren't nervous would be lying to ghosts. On one hand, the grand plan for tribal expansion. On the other, wife, kids, and a warm, wife and kids. Both sides were desperately urgent. Which should you prioritize? Your head throbbed. You couldn't possibly take two wives on the verge of labor to war. Tangled in this dilemma all the way, you arrived at the shipyard in Youjiang prefecture. The original workshop for twin-masted sailboats was already empty. The last batch of 4 ships had all been launched. In the new factory area nearby, work was proceeding at a feverish pace. Steam billowed from a huge workshop shed, where countless workers were drawing water bucket by bucket from wells. Inside the shed, others were busy moving curved ship planks. This was the plank steaming workshop. Inside, over 100 extra-long steamers were neatly arranged, each 30 meters long. Beneath the steamers, more than 20 furnace openings were densely packed, each with a dedicated stoker responsible for tending the fire. Nearby, laborers, hired temporarily, carried firewood and added water, building wooden ships, especially. Sailing ships required not only splicing and heat-shaping the keel, but also steaming the hull planks thoroughly to soften them. Otherwise, the stiff wooden planks couldn't possibly be bent to fit the curved hull. During installation, the planks had to be tightly fitted. However, after cooling, due to thermal expansion and contraction, gaps would still appear between the planks. No matter, the waterproofing workshop would handle that later. Temporary workers were a huge help in this shipbuilding effort. All the heavy lifting and labor-intensive tasks were assigned to them, allowing skilled craftsmen to focus entirely on the core construction. You walked from the material preparation workshop to the keel workshop and found few people there, just few master craftsmen with blueprints and soft rulers, directing a group of temporary workers. Upon asking, you learned that the task you assigned for the tower ship keels was essentially complete. The last one had just been assembled. Now they were building a sunken-hold sand carrier, an extra vessel not originally ordered. You nodded, praised everyone happily, and then eagerly went to the plank installation workshop. Unlike the previous quietness, this place was packed like a marketplace, filled with the clang and clamor of work. Because of the ample manpower, the planking of the tower ships was being carried out simultaneously from all angles and levels. Bamboo scaffolding surrounded the tall hulls. Planks were being laid upwards on both sides of the hull simultaneously, with upper and lower teams working towards each other. At the stern, a dedicated team was laying the outer stern planks. Through openings yet to be sealed, you could even see several teams working concurrently within the 4 decks inside the hull. The planking workshop was definitely the busiest and had the largest workload in the entire shipbuilding process. Seeing this all-out simultaneous construction approach, working from top to bottom, inside and out, thrilled you. This method was pushing the construction speed to its absolute limit. You found the workshop supervisor, who patted his chest and guaranteed, as long as materials kept coming, plank installation could be completed in 10 days. You were overjoyed to hear this, and immediately announced, once all the new ships were launched, there would definitely be generous rewards. Keep up the good work. At the same time, you turned to Da Shu, responsible for timber, who was following behind you, and instructed, timber and iron nails must keep pace. Material supply must absolutely not become a bottleneck hindering construction progress. Next, the two of you went to the waterproofing workshop. You noticed that most of the workers here were actually women. You nodded inwardly in approval and went closer for a careful look. Waterproofing sailing ships mainly involved stuffing hemp rope or oakum into the gaps between planks, then using a specially mixed compound of tung oil and lime to completely smooth over and seal the seams. The work wasn't difficult, but it demanded extreme patience and meticulousness, and the workload was enormous. Just think, how many planks were needed for a ship tens of meters long? And for every plank, there was a seam. Mobilizing women idle at home to do this work was perfectly suitable. No wonder the shipyard's efficiency was so high. Finally, you and Da Shu went to the next workshop, only to find the area designated for painting empty. Upon asking, you learned that the other 2 3-masted sailing ships had already been launched ahead of schedule. One had already completed outfitting, installing sails, anchors, ropes, pulleys, etc., and was being taken out as a training ship to drill new sailors. The other was still being outfitted at the pier. You immediately rushed to the pier and personally boarded the ship for inspection. Looking at this warship, almost identical to your blueprints, nearly 600 tons displacement, over 450 tons maximum, cargo capacity, a nearly 40-meter-long 3-masted behemoth, you were extremely satisfied. Although compared to the steel giants of your previous life, it was just a little brother. In this era, it was already a top-tier warship. With a 40-meter one, could an 80-meter one be far behind? Just as Da Shu was about to invite you back for lunch, the ship that had gone out for training happened to return. You immediately waved off Da Shu's invitation and decided you weren't leaving. Today, you would stay on board, eat communal rations with the sailors, and experience life adrift on the water. This 3-masted tower ship was an absolute behemoth. The main mast stood a full 43 meters tall, with the 2 auxiliary masts at 39 meters, carrying 3 stiff Chinese-style sails. The entire ship, from bottom to top, measured 14 meters, with a draft of 6.5 meters. Inside, it boasted 4 decks, and the top deck featured a tall stern castle. There were 2 decks above and below the waterline, with windows cut into the sides. It could comfortably accommodate 800 people at once. The bottom hold could also store 3 months' worth of rations and fresh water for 800. This carrying capacity, in the current era, made it practically a mobile fortress. The ship's design was adapted from the famous galleons of the age of sail in your previous life. Its hull lines were smooth, making it stable at sea, and crucially, it could carry a massive load. By the standards of that era, only a third-rate ship of the line, over 60 meters long with 3 gun decks above the waterline, could hold 800 men and carry 6 months' worth of supplies. Your ship was only 40 meters long, a size smaller, so logically it shouldn't hold 800. But the key difference was, the Han tribe's ships didn't need to carry those dead-heavy iron cannons, gunpowder, and cannonballs, nor did they need thick armor. Why? Because the enemy didn't even have decent ships. How could they possibly attack yours? What was the point of defending? Therefore, all the space on your 3-masted tower ship could be used for living quarters. The hold didn't need to store gunpowder. It could be entirely packed with grain. As a result, transporting 800 people was easy. For short trips, squeezing in 1,000 wouldn't be a problem. You explored the ship thoroughly, top to bottom, finally having lunch with several key personnel in the splendid stern castle. On the top deck, during the meal, Da Shu, having had a bit too much to drink, couldn't resist singing your praises. No, it was heartfelt admiration. The chief is truly a god descended to earth, the Grand Master of shipbuilding. I remember when I first met the chief, you were still tying small flimsy boats out of animal hides and willow branches, carrying only 1 person at a time. In just a few years, our Han tribe can now build these giants like little mountains. With such mighty ships, where can the great Han celestial army not go? Ha 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 ha. The whole table erupted in laughter, but deep down, everyone agreed with Da Shu. The changes in the Han tribe over the past few years were plain for all to see, and they knew even better that it was all thanks to the chief's leadership. Achieving this now filled everyone with a sense of shared glory, proud to have been a part of it. Looking at this joyous scene, you felt quite pleased yourself. This was probably the nascent form of national confidence. After lunch, you suggested continuing the sea trial in the afternoon to test the sailors' operational skills. The captains of these new ships were all promoted from the old captains of the twin-masted sailboats. The former first and second mates became captains of the newly built sunken-hold sand carriers. Even earlier sailors were now captains of twin-masted sailboats. The remaining vacancies were filled by recruiting newcomers. Through this system, every veteran sailor got promoted. Seeing this rocket-like promotion speed, everyone trained desperately hard. They all knew your principle for personnel, ability. First, as long as you had the skills even as a newcomer, you could immediately be entrusted with important responsibilities. This was the advantage of the Han tribe. The chief was young, and the tribe, like him, was vibrant and full of drive. On the training ship, The captain yelled commands at the top of his lungs. Some sailors strained to turn the heavy helm. Others huffed and puffed, pulling the weighty sail ropes, while the lookout atop the mast kept a close eye on the wind vane, constantly feeding information to the captain. The large ship slowly pulled away from the pier, turned towards the Great Lake to the northeast, and proceeded along the deep, unfrozen channel. It was the dead of winter, and the biting wind on the lake howled, filling the sails and pushing the ship to maximum speed. The rounded bow cut through the calm lake surface, plowing two white wakes, startling numerous fat fish below into fleeing. Frantically, you, meanwhile, comfortably stayed in the warm stern castle, warming yourself by the charcoal brazier. The teapot on the stove was whistling softly. Holding a cup of hot tea, you admired the icy lake scenery through a crack in the window. You placed the teacup on the table. The tea inside remained perfectly still, which surprised you somewhat. The ship was sailing incredibly steadily, almost ridiculously so. In your past life, you had been on ocean-going vessels. Even warships pitched and rolled significantly, let alone ordinary ships. How could this wooden vessel be so stable now? Perhaps it was because it was an inland lake, coupled with winter, making the lake's surface like a mirror, incomparable to the turbulent open sea. After cruising for nearly an hour, the large ship circled the site you had designated for the coking plant, then turned back. Upon docking, you went to check on the training progress of the sunken hold cargo ships. Finally, you once again urged the shipyard craftsmen that all ships must be delivered before the end of the month. Then you rowed back to Hanyang Prefecture at top speed. However, this time you didn't go home but went directly around the city to the military camp outside Fuma Pass to the north. Furthermore, you specifically brought along Yu Fu, who had been hibernating at home for the winter. You had assigned Yu Fu an important task for this expedition. Flashing your command token, you went straight to the central command tent. Immediately, you ordered the herald, beat the drums to summon the generals. All officers at the rank of Guanzhang, centurion, and above, report to the main tent for council immediately. Dong, 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 dong. After 3 rounds of drumming, the officers arrived one after another. They were still a bit confused, unsure why they were suddenly summoned in the dead of winter, until they entered the main tent and saw you seated. The commander's chair. Your subordinate greets the chief. All officers in the tent lined up according to rank, dropped to one knee in unison and saluted with cupped fists. Rise, generals, be seated. You waved your hand dismissively, then announced with a serious expression, I have summoned you all today for a pre-battle mobilization meeting to arrange matters for the expedition. After the meeting, the entire army will strike camp and depart immediately. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Winter solstice had just passed. The mountains were snowbound, the weather freezing cold. Launching an expedition now? Wasn't it a bit too rushed? However, since the senior commanders remained silent, these minor centurions naturally didn't dare voice objections. The generals acknowledged the order and sat down around the massive sand table, clad in their iron armor. Then you began to speak. Yu Fu, brief everyone on the target we intend to strike this time. Yes, Chief. Yu Fu bowed to accept the order, then bowed respectfully to the assembled generals. They all nodded in return. Many of the high-ranking officers recognized him. Yu Fu picked up a thin command baton and pointed to the sand table. Before winter set in, I led a fleet from Luoyang Prefecture down the river. We sailed during the day and rested ashore at night. After 3 days, we discovered a tribe on the east bank, the location of the coal-rich Lu tribe. It has now been named Dongxin Prefecture by the chief and incorporated into the territory of our Han tribe. The crowd nodded. They knew about this. The chief had just issued a notice a few days ago. Now, not just officials, but even common folk knew the Han tribe had gained another prefecture. Yu Fu continued his briefing. From Dongxin Prefecture, we continued south, still traveling by day and resting by night. After about 7 or 8 days, we encountered a wide stretch of water filled with sandbars. We discovered the Li tribe on the bank and found several mineral deposits nearby. Oh right, those crocodile skins were obtained there. As he spoke, Yu Fu planted a small flag in that area on the sand table and continued, "After passing through the sandbar area, we sailed for about another 10 days. Here, we encountered a barbarian tribe that lived by hunting. Initially, I wanted to trade with them for some local specialties and gather information. But these savages couldn't even understand our language and were extremely barbaric. My envoy hadn't even finished speaking when they charged, attacked, stole our gifts, snatched weapons from several crew members and killed 3 of our men. Of course, our men weren't pushovers either. We killed over 20 of them before breaking out. The tribe we are targeting this time is this one. Now, let me detail their situation. This tribe has a population of roughly 2,000, with probably 400 to 500 able-bodied fighters. They subsist entirely on hunting. Their weapons are mainly stone spears and stone axes, with a small number of shoddy bows and arrows. The majority remaining are women and children, with almost no elderly. They live on an open plain near the riverbank. Their dwellings are crude, dome-shaped huts made of mud and stone, clustered together, with no surrounding walls. The area has lush water and grass suitable for farming, but they don't know how. Because the vegetation is good, attracting many wild animals with bushes and berries, they just stay there and hunt. Moreover, they frequently fight with neighboring tribes and particularly enjoy stealing wives. Every night they roast meat and hold bonfire parties, invariably dragging out a few captives to fight each other for entertainment. The loser is killed on the spot. The nearby tribes have long suffered terribly at their hands. Everyone listened intently as Yu Fu described the enemy. When he finished, you clapped your hands to get everyone's attention. All right. That's the general situation of the target. However, this information is several months old, so we'll need further reconnaissance. Now let me state the strategic objective for this campaign. Next year's development tasks are heavy. Mining coal, building workshops, all require a large labor force. Relying solely on integrating new clansmen is far from enough. Therefore, we must find ways to capture more slaves. This time is no different. Your tone became extremely grave. The objective of this operation is not killing. We must make every effort to capture everyone in this tribe alive. Death is too easy for them. I want them to serve the Han tribe as hard laborers for life, to atone for the crimes they have committed. Hearing you speak this way, the general's expressions also turned serious. Only Xuetu, standing nearby, frowned slightly without speaking. Xuetu's family was killed by the Fire Tribe, and he had always considered vengeance his duty. Towards enemies who had killed his own people, he leaned towards eradication, root and stem, rather than capture. Besides, capturing enemies alive was much harder than killing them, undoubtedly increasing the pressure and risk for the soldiers. Noticing his frown and apparent desire to speak, you called him out. Xuetu, do you have any questions? Speak up now, let's discuss it together. Yes, Chief. Xuetu stood up. I don't have major questions, just feel that capturing them alive, as the chief said, might not be easy. With our 4,000 men against their 400 or 500 fighters 10 to 1, winning is certainly not a problem, but capturing them alive is very difficult. As Yu Fu mentioned, they are savage and aggressive, but unless they are fools, seeing our massive force attacking, they'll likely scatter and vanish the moment we land. Then we'll just be chasing them. But we're unfamiliar with the terrain. Pursuing too far could put us at a disadvantage maybe, even allowing them to use the terrain against us. That wouldn't be worth the risk, Xuetu analyzed earnestly. The other officers present nodded in agreement. You nodded, acknowledging his point. That Xuetu could think this far did surprise you slightly, but on second thought, this fellow was an old hand at guerrilla warfare and assassination against the Fire Tribe. He certainly had his own methods, or he would have been caught long ago. What does everyone think of Xuetu's assessment? How should we fight to round up the enemy entirely and capture them all alive? You asked again. On the other side, Ying Rui, commander of the Jinwu Guard, thought for a moment and spoke. Chief, I believe our army should fully leverage our numerical superiority and encircle the enemy. If we can successfully encircle them, we might even force them to surrender directly. However, I haven't figured out the specifics of how to encircle them yet. You nodded again, pleased. Both generals have spoken well. Now let me add to that. You swept your gaze across the assembly. Listen carefully, all of you. Today, I will teach you a lesson on what tactics truly mean. Hearing the chief himself was about to impart secret knowledge. All the officers immediately sat up straight, pricked up their ears, adopting the attentive posture of good students ready to listen. Commander Ying just mentioned that the key to this battle lies in encirclement. If we can surround the enemy, we've already won more than half the battle. So how can we surround the enemy stealthily, without them noticing and prevent their escape? Today, I will teach you a move. Feint in the east, attack in the west. Firstly, the date of departure must be chosen before the start of spring. In winter, all tribes reduce outdoor activities. This is the optimal time for us to encircle and annihilate the enemy. Once spring arrives, the ice and snow melt, and the savages, starved after a long winter, will surely scatter to hunt. Trying to catch them all in one net then will be difficult. As soon as you finish speaking, a low murmur of "oh" spread through the tent as understanding dawned on everyone. So that was the chief's reason for insisting on deploying troops in the dead of winter. Truly far-sighted even considering this detail.